A human marine lay dying on a Deathworld, hunted by the entire Vorkarian Empire, in a desperate bid to save humanity from extinction. Blood dripped from Lawrence Mitchell's concussed head as he kicked open his crumpled escape pod, stumbling into the toxic alien jungle. His battered power armor was missing plates, his pulse rifle cracked and sparking. Vorkarian dreadnoughts had ambushed the USF Valiant in deep space. Boarding parties of the vicious aliens, known for skinning humans alive, had overrun the Valiant. They were led by Warlord Laros himself, a scarred monster who wielded a screaming plasma scythe to hack Marines apart. Lawrence remembered Athena, the ship AI, frantically urging him to flee for the escape pods as the Valiant's hull breached. "They're coming for the crew! Run!" The desperate flight through blaring alarms and strobing warning lights. Explosions and human screams as the aliens butchered their way closer, at last diving into the pod, Athena sealing it and ejecting it into space right as a plasma scythe sliced through the hatch. The jungle was teeming with slithering horrors, glowing with bioluminescent poison. But the Vorkarians hunting him were far worse. They would flay him slowly, keeping him conscious for every second, break his mind, and drain every USF secret from his brain. Learn the locations of the major human colonies, exterminate mankind, planet by agonizing planet. Billions would die in incomprehensible anguish. Unless he survived and got a warning out first. Human lives depended on his success. So no matter the pain, no matter the odds, he would find a way. He had to. Lawrence crept through the toxic alien foliage, senses on high alert. He placed each step with care to avoid drawing attention. His marine training served him well. He used trees and brush for concealment as he advanced. Bioluminescent life forms pulsed around him, their light thankfully hiding his heat signature. The guttural barks of Vorkarian hunters sounded in the distance. The whine of their plasma weapons charging sent a chill down his spine. He froze, listened, waited for the noises to recede before moving again. He needed cover, and he needed it soon. The jungle would keep him hidden for only so long before the Vorkarian scanners picked him up. Supplies were just as critical. His armor was in bad shape, and his rifle hanging by a thread. A glint of metal through the undergrowth caught his eye. He approached cautiously, sweeping his rifle back and forth. It was a crashed Vorkarian scout ship, the hull breached by enormous gashes. Massive claw marks scored the metal. Lawrence shuddered to imagine the creature that had done this. The ship seemed abandoned, a lucky break. He clambered through the torn hull, pieces of alien metal screeching underfoot. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically. The ship had been well equipped. He snatched a Vorkarian plasma pistol from a rack, slinging it on his hip. A medkit went into his pack, along with a portable generator. In the rear of the ship, he found the jackpot, a long-range communicator. It had taken some damage but looked repairable. The log spoke of a Vorkarian staging base on this world. The Deathworld was the launchpad for assaults on human colonies in the sector. The log also mentioned an alien artifact of immense power hidden somewhere on the planet. The Vorkarians were desperate to claim it, believing it was the key to their victory. Lawrence's hands clenched. If the Vorkarians found this artifact, it could mean the end of humanity. He had to warn the USF about the base and the artifact. A sudden skittering sound behind him. He whirled, ripping the plasma pistol from his belt. A nightmarish insectoid creature loomed over him, acid saliva sizzling on the deck. It lunged, and Lawrence fired. The plasma bolt punctured the creature's exoskeleton, spraying ichor. It convulsed and collapsed. But the fight had caused a ruckus. More insectoid screeches echoed from outside the ship. Dozens of them attracted by the sounds and smells of the fight. Lawrence checked the charge on his new pistol grimly. This planet was throwing everything it had at him, but he had a mission. Failure meant the extermination of his entire species. He would survive this, he had to, for the sake of all humanity. The creatures screeched in fury, a swarm of claws and fangs and acid spit chasing him through the thick jungle. Lawrence weaved between bioluminescent trees, ducked under vines dripping with glowing sap, leapt over streams of bubbling, toxic ooze. His marine training served him well. He picked paths to slow the creatures down, to put obstacles between him and them, but they kept coming, relentless. His lungs burned, muscles screamed, but he pushed through the pain because stopping meant death. Suddenly the ground disappeared from under him. He tumbled down a steep slope, smashing through undergrowth before coming to a crashing halt against a rock wall. Dazed, he looked up to see a cleverly hidden cave entrance. The insectoid horde was closing in. No choice. He scrambled into the cave, squeezing through the narrow opening. The creatures reached it seconds later, clawing and shrieking, but they were too big to follow. The caves were a labyrinth, twisting and turning deep into the earth, but to Lawrence's surprise they were traversable. Spacious tunnels, smooth floors. Not natural. Made. Strange glyphs covered the walls, illuminated by glowing crystals embedded in the rock. They depicted figures, humanoid but not human, an ancient species, with pointed ears and almond-shaped eyes. Scenes showed them living in vast cities, wielding fantastic technologies, a spacefaring civilization that once called this Deathworld home. More glyphs showing a revered object, descriptions of its immense power, and a star map pointing to its hidden location on this planet. It matched the artifact from the Vorkarian log. Following the map, Lawrence delved deeper. The tunnels opened into a massive chamber filled with wonders. Machines the size of starships, weapons crackling with exotic energies, sleek vehicles for land, sea, and air, technology beyond anything the Federation or Vorkarians had. Cobwebs and dust coated everything. This place had sat untouched for millennia. On a pedestal in the center, an orb of swirling light, a personal energy shield. Lawrence reached out. As his fingers brushed it, it flared to life, enveloping him in a shimmering barrier. His armor's HUD lit up, reporting the shield's immense defensive capabilities. With this he could stand against armies. A sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. A shrill whining sound, Vorkarian plasma drills. They'd tracked him here. They were boring through the bedrock, hungry for his blood. No time to lose. He grabbed the shield orb and any other weapons he could carry. Then he got to work, converting the chamber into a kill box. Tripwires connected to plasma mines, jury-rigged sentry turrets, choke points and firing lanes, a soldier's traps to even the odds. The cave wall exploded inward, spraying molten rock. A hulking Vorkarian warrior emerged from the smoke, plasma scythe ignited. The cave erupted into chaos as the Vorkarians poured through the breach, plasma weapons spitting deadly bolts. Lawrence dove behind a rocky outcropping, his energy shield flaring as it absorbed the brunt of the assault. He returned fire with precision, each pulse rifle shot taking down a hunter in a spray of gore. But they kept coming, heedless of their mounting casualties. Lawrence was forced to fall back, ducking and weaving through the maze of stalagmites. He primed a plasma mine and tossed it into a narrow choke point. The explosion turned the passage into a charnel house of scorched flesh and shattered chitin. A hulking Vorkarian charged through the flames, plasma scythe whirling. It was Laros the warlord himself. His cybernetic eye glowed malevolently as he bore down on Lawrence. "Die, human filth!" Laros roared, his scythe cleaving through stone like butter. Lawrence rolled away, the scythe's edge missing him by inches. He came up firing, but Laros was fast, inhumanly so. The plasma bolts splashed harmlessly off the warlord's personal shield. Laros lunged, scythe slashing. Lawrence parried with his rifle, the weapons locking together. They strained against each other, face to face. "I will flay the skin from your bones," Laros snarled. "I will feast on your entrails." Lawrence pressed his advantage, lashing out with a flurry of strikes. Fists, elbows, knees, he battered the warlord relentlessly. But Laros was a tough bastard. He weathered the storm and retaliated, his scythe a blur of deadly energy. The blade sliced through Lawrence's energy shield, scoring his armor. Warning klaxons blared in his helmet, shield integrity compromised, armor breached. But Lawrence fought on, drawing on every ounce of his training and fury. This monster had slaughtered his comrades, had butchered innocent civilians, had made it his mission to exterminate humanity. Lawrence ducked under a decapitating swing and surged forward, combat knife in hand. He drove the blade up under Laros's chin with all his strength. The tip punched through the roof of the warlord's mouth and into his brain. Laros convulsed, his scythe clattering to the ground. Then he went limp, sliding off Lawrence's knife to crumple in a heap. Lawrence snatched up the fallen scythe, the alien weapon humming with baleful energy. A fitting trophy. The other Vorkarians, seeing their leader fall, fled back into the tunnels, chittering in fear. But Lawrence knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Laros's death would draw more of the bastards like carrion birds. The whole damn planet would be after him now. He had to move fast, find the artifact and get the hell off this rock, but he was hurt, bad. Blood seeped from a dozen wounds, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through his body. He injected a combat stimulant from his dwindling supply. The pain receded as the drugs hit his system, replaced by a jittery, manic energy. He would crash hard later, but that was a problem for future Lawrence. He consulted the decoded star map from the cave glyphs, comparing it to the intel from the Vorkarian logs. The artifact's location pulsed on his HUD, a shimmering waypoint. It was deep in the planet's wilderness, far from his current position. Slinging the scythe over his shoulder, Lawrence set off, leaving the carnage of the cave behind. He emerged onto a vast swampland, a fetid expanse of bubbling mires and twisted fungal growths. Noxious gases wafted from luminous pools, the air thick and choking. Every step was treacherous, the ground threatening to give way beneath him and plunge him into the caustic depths. Strange creatures slithered through the murk, their cries echoing across the swamp. But he slogged on, following the waypoint's guidance. He forded streams of steaming acidic water. He hacked through dense thickets of razor-edged foliage. He fought off the hungry predators that ambushed him from the shadows. Each obstacle overcome, each horror defeated, brought him closer to his goal. The artifact was near, he could feel it, an ancient power waiting to be claimed. The swamp gave way to a blasted wasteland of cracked earth and jagged stone spires. Geysers of toxic gas erupted from fumaroles, the air shimmering with heat. In the distance, the ruins of a colossal alien city loomed, cyclopean structures of impossible geometry, weathered by eons, but still standing proud. The artifact was there, somewhere in that labyrinth of ancient stone. Lawrence's salvage communicator crackled to life, startling him. He'd almost forgotten about the device, so focused was he on his mission. A distress signal pulsed on the display, weak but steady. The ID tag identified it as a human escape pod beacon. Another survivor from the Valiant? Lawrence hesitated, torn. The artifact was close, he could feel it. But the thought of leaving a fellow human to die on this hellish world... Mind made up, Lawrence altered course, striking out towards the beacon. He just hoped whoever was waiting at the other end had managed to survive this long. The Deathworld wasn't done with him yet, but he would face it as he had everything else, one bloody step at a time. The distress beacon led Lawrence to a foggy stretch of alien jungle. Vines hung thick as cables from twisted trees that glowed with bioluminescent fungi. The fog swirled around the wreckage of an escape pod, its hull cracked open like an egg. Lawrence crept forward, plasma scythe at the ready. Inside the pod, amid the sparking wreckage, lay a badly wounded Marine. The man's breath came in ragged gasps, his shredded pressure suit slick with blood. "Easy, soldier. I'm here to help," Lawrence said. He pulled a medkit from his pack and got to work, sealing the worst of the wounds with quick clotting foam. The Marine coughed, specks of blood on his lips. "Sergeant Marcus Reeves, USF Valiant. That you, Mitchell?" "Affirmative, Sergeant. What's our sitrep?" Lawrence's heart raced. "That's a goldmine, Sergeant. We need—" "There's more," Reeves cut in. "That artifact the Xenos are after. It's a weapon. Planet-killer tech from that ancient civilization. Vorkarians get their claws on it. They'll burn every human world to ash." Reeves shuddered, his face going slack. "Promise me, Mitchell. Don't let those bastards win. Destroy that artifact if you have to. Don't let it fall into their hands." The light faded from Reeves's eyes. He went still, his final mission complete. Lawrence bowed his head, a silent promise. Then he took the data drive and slotted it into his armor. The Vorkarian base lit up on his HUD, a holographic projection detailing every cannon emplacement, every guard patrol. Lawrence studied it, committing the details to memory. He waited for night to fall, the jungle erupting with the cries of nocturnal horrors. Under the cover of darkness he moved. The base perimeter bristled with plasma cannons and razor wire. Vorkarian guards stalked the ramparts, their armor glossy in the moonlight, but they weren't prepared for a human marine. Lawrence activated his active camouflage, fading into the shadows. He slipped past motion sensors, disabled alarms with hacked codes from the data drive. When he couldn't avoid a guard patrol, he took them down silently, a quick slash of his knife across scaled throats. Inside the compound, he stuck to the shadows, dodging the sweeping searchlights. Reeves's intel guided him, leading him past barracks and weapon depots. Then he saw something new, something the data hadn't shown. A research lab, heavily guarded. Curiosity gnawed at him. He had to know what the Vorkarians were up to. He crept to a ventilation duct, pried open the grate and crawled inside. The metal shaft was barely wide enough for his armored bulk, but he pushed on, ignoring the scrape of steel on steel. Voices drifted up from below, guttural Vorkarian speech. Lawrence peered through a vent cover into a cavernous lab. Cages lined the walls, filled with specimens from the Deathworld. Insectoid horrors, acid-spewing plants, snarling predators. Vorkarian scientists moved among them, taking samples, jotting notes on holographic pads. In the center of the lab, a massive hologram rotated. An ancient alien city, the same one from the cave glyphs. The scientists chattered excitedly, pointing to a pulsing location marker. The artifact, one said, lies within the Temple of Light in the city's heart. Our forces will claim it soon, another replied, and with it the power to eradicate the human scourge once and for all. Lawrence's blood ran cold. They knew where the artifact was. He was running out of time. He backed out of the vent, mind racing. He needed to cripple this base, buy himself a head start, and he knew just how. He planted plasma charges as he went, on power generators, fuel depots, the lab's specimen tanks. Remote detonators blinked on his HUD. Then he made for the landing pad. A sleek Vorkarian scout ship sat prepped for launch. He clambered aboard, his armor's adaptive interface decrypting the alien controls. The engines hummed to life. The ship blasted off, G-forces slamming Lawrence into the pilot's chair. As he rocketed away, he thumbed the detonator. The night lit up as the charges blew, fireballs mushrooming into the sky. Sirens wailed, the base plunged into chaos. A fierce joy surged through Lawrence, a struck blow for his fallen comrades. But his elation was short-lived. Plasma fire streaked past his view screen, Vorkarian fighters rising from the flaming base. They had him locked in. Lawrence wrenched the controls, sending the ship into a spiraling dive. The Deathworld surface rushed up, jagged canyons and massive trees whipping past. The fighters dogged him, plasma cannons hammering his shields. Lawrence juked and jinked, weaving between rock spires, skimming over boiling lakes of acid. The Vorkarian ship stuck to him, predators scenting blood. Lawrence gritted his teeth, hands flying over the controls. He had to lose them, had to reach the artifact before they could regroup. He spun the ship into a narrow canyon, walls blurring past on either side. The fighters followed, raking his tail with fire. Proximity alarms screamed. One wrong move and he'd be splattered across the rocks. But this was his element, the rush of combat, the adrenaline surge of danger. He let instinct take over, years of training guiding his hands. He executed a barrel roll, lasers flashing past his cockpit. A quick boost and he shot forward, engines roaring. The fighter behind him, too slow to react, plowed into the canyon wall in a plume of fire and shrapnel. The others broke off, peeling away to regroup. Lawrence kept going, pushing the ship to its limits. The artifact was close now, the ancient city rising from the mists ahead. No time to celebrate. Those fighters would be back with reinforcements. He had to reach the temple, secure the artifact before the Vorkarians could bring their full might to bear. He set the ship down on a crumbling plaza, the stone cracked and choked with alien vines. The city loomed around him, cyclopean towers still standing after eons. The air crackled with an eerie energy, a palpable aura of power. Somewhere in this maze of ruins lay an ancient secret, a weapon that could destroy worlds, a weapon the Vorkarians would kill to possess. But they'd have to get through him first. Lawrence readied his scythe and stepped into the waiting dark of the alien metropolis. One marine against an empire, the odds he loved best. He'd danced with death on this world, and death had yet to claim him. And until his mission was done, until humanity was safe, it never would. Lawrence wrenched the ship into a corkscrew dive, the G-forces slamming him back in his seat. The canyon walls blurred past, jagged rock mere inches from his view screen. The Vorkarian fighters doggedly pursued, their plasma cannons lighting up the narrow passage. Lawrence gritted his teeth and punched a command into the ship's computer. The cloaking device engaged with a whir, and the ship shimmered out of visibility. He cut the engines and let momentum carry him, the ship drifting silently through the winding canyon. The Vorkarian fighters overshot his position, their sensors unable to track him. They circled back, searching, but Lawrence was already gone, gliding out of the canyon and into the misty valley beyond. He brought the ship down on a cracked stone plaza, ancient alien structures looming out of the fog. As he disembarked, a group of tall, lithe figures emerged from the mist. They had elongated skulls, luminous eyes, and skin that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. "I am Lawrence Mitchell of the United Systems Federation," Lawrence said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I come seeking the artifact." The lead alien, draped in flowing robes, stepped forward. Its voice echoed in Lawrence's mind, a telepathic projection. "We are the Zelthari, guardians of the Temple of Light. The artifact you seek is a weapon of immense power, capable of unmaking worlds. It is our sacred duty to protect it from those who would misuse it." Lawrence nodded. "The Vorkarian Empire seeks the artifact. They'll destroy countless lives if they get their hands on it. I want to make sure that doesn't happen." The Zelthari conferred among themselves, their thoughts a swirl of colors and emotions in Lawrence's mind. Finally, the leader spoke again. "We sense the truth in your words, Lawrence Mitchell, but we cannot simply hand over the artifact to an outsider. You must prove yourself worthy." The mists parted, revealing a gaping portal carved with glowing glyphs. "Within lies the path of trials," the Zelthari said. "3 challenges, to test your body, mind, and spirit. Only by overcoming them will you earn the right to decide the artifact's fate." Lawrence squared his shoulders and strode towards the portal. The Zelthari's words echoed in his mind. "Be warned, Lawrence Mitchell. The trials will push you to your limits. They will make you confront your deepest fears and darkest secrets. Many have entered, but few have returned." Lawrence paused at the threshold, the portal's energies dancing over his armor. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the billions of lives at stake. He had no choice. He had to succeed. He stepped through, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The first trial materialized around him, a vast labyrinth of twisting passages and yawning chasms. Glowing glyphs pulsed on the walls, ancient machinery hummed beneath his feet. He moved forward cautiously, senses straining. Traps could lurk around any corner. Pressure plates, motion sensors, energy fields. One wrong step could mean dismemberment or disintegration. A slight depression in the floor caught his eye. He froze, scrutinizing it. Yes, the telltale seam of a hidden panel. He edged around it, hugging the wall. Further in, a narrow bridge spanned a bottomless abyss. As he set foot on it, hidden projectors flared to life. Searing lasers crisscrossed the bridge, weaving a deadly web. Lawrence timed the laser's pattern, then dove forward, tucking into a roll. He felt the heat of the beams sizzle the air above him as he tumbled under them, coming up in a sprint. A rumble shook the labyrinth. Sections of wall slammed together, retracting, then slamming again, faster and faster, a crushing corridor ready to pulverize him. Lawrence raced towards it, his armor's servos whining. At the last second he leapt, jets in his boots firing. He shot through a gap in the crushing walls, feeling them clip his armor as he barely cleared them. He hit the ground running on the other side, not daring to slow. He could feel the labyrinth shifting around him, remaking itself, trying to thwart him. But he would not be denied. He had a mission, a purpose, and no maze, no matter how fiendish, would stop him. He pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth, the glow of the artifact drawing him like a lodestone. The trials had only just begun, but he would face them. He would overcome them. For Earth, for his lost comrades, for the innocent billions depending on him. Failure was not an option. The battle raged in the heart of the alien temple, plasma fire scorching ancient stone. Lawrence stood back to back with the Zelthari warriors, his rifle barking as he cut down Vorkarian after Vorkarian. The telepathic aliens fought with fluid grace, their energy blades slicing through chitin and flesh. But the Vorkarians kept coming, a tide of claws and fangs and malevolent purpose. They swarmed over fallen comrades, heedless of losses, driven by their hunger for the artifact. Lawrence saw an opening, a path to the artifact chamber. "Cover me!" he shouted to the Zelthari. They nodded, a telepathic acknowledgement brushing his mind. He leapt over the twitching corpse, racing onward. The artifact chamber was just ahead, a doorway thrumming with eldritch energies. 3 Zelthari warriors fell in behind him, energy blades humming. They would make their stand here, an unbreakable line against the Vorkarian horde. Guttural war cries echoed from the chamber ahead, Vorkarians already inside. They had breached the inner sanctum. Lawrence charged through the doorway, rifle raised. The artifact pulsed on a central dais, a orb of swirling hypnotic colors. Vorkarians ringed the chamber, weapons trained on the artifact and the approaching humans. A huge Vorkarian stepped forward, ornate armor gleaming. Scars crisscrossed his carapace, badges of battles fought and won. A commander, one of the Vorkarian elite. "Surrender the artifact, human," the commander growled, "and your death will be quick. Resist and you will suffer as none of your kind have suffered before." Lawrence trained his rifle on the commander's head, finger tightening on the trigger. The Zelthari moved to flank him, energy blades at the ready. The commander's mandibles twitched, a chitinous grin. "You are outmatched, human. You cannot hope to defeat us, but your bravery has impressed me. Kneel before us, pledge your loyalty to the Vorkarian Empire, and I will grant you a place of honor in our ranks." For a heartbeat, Lawrence hesitated. The offer was tempting. He could accept, bide his time, strike at the Vorkarians from within, sabotage their efforts, feed intel to the human Federation. "I'd rather die than kneel to you," Lawrence spat. The commander snarled, mandibles spreading wide. "Then die you shall, human." Plasma fire erupted from the Vorkarian weapons, a storm of deadly energy. Lawrence and the Zelthari dove for cover, the artifact's plinth taking the brunt of the barrage. Lawrence rolled to his feet, rifle snapping up. He fired as he moved, plasma bolts stitching a line across the Vorkarian ranks. Chitin cracked, ichor sprayed, aliens screamed. The commander charged, plasma scythe blazing. His first swing nearly took Lawrence's head off, a sizzling arc of death. Lawrence ducked, the scythe passing a hair's breadth above him. He brought his rifle up point blank against the commander's chest and pulled the trigger. Click! The weapon jammed, its energy cell spent. The commander's backswing caught him in the ribs, sent him sprawling. The rifle clattered away, lost in the chaos. Lawrence rolled to his feet, drawing his combat knife. The blade looked pitiful against the commander's scythe, but it was all he had left. The commander stalked forward, scythe raised. "Pathetic," he sneered. "Just like the rest of your species, weak, inferior. You will all burn, and your worlds will become our feeding grounds." Lawrence met the commander's charge, knife flashing. He ducked under the scythe, the superheated blade singeing his hair. His knife darted out, seeking gaps in the commander's armor. They danced a deadly waltz, scythe and knife, alien and human. The commander was strong, fast, a veteran of 100 campaigns, but Lawrence was a Marine, trained in hand-to-hand combat since he could walk. The Zelthari fought around them, energy blades humming as they met the Vorkarian onslaught. They were holding the line, but barely. For every alien that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. Lawrence's knife found a seam in the commander's armor, sank deep into alien flesh. The commander roared, more in rage than pain. His scythe came around in a vicious arc. Lawrence twisted, but too slow. The scythe's tip pierced his side, burned through flesh and bone. Agony exploded through him, and he stumbled, vision going grey at the edges. Lawrence looked up at the alien, a death incarnate. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives he had sworn to protect. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't. With a roar of defiance, Lawrence surged upward, ignoring the white-hot agony in his side. He drove his knife up under the commander's chin, into his brain. The commander stiffened, scythe falling from suddenly slack claws. Lawrence twisted the knife, felt the alien shudder and go limp. He wrenched the blade free, let the commander's corpse fall. The other Vorkarians, seeing their leader fall, wavered, mandibles clicking in confusion. Lawrence pressed the advantage. He snatched up the commander's scythe, felt it thrum to life in his hands. With a wordless battle cry, he charged the remaining aliens, Zelthari at his side. The scythe flashed, cleaving chitin and bone. Vorkarians fell, dismembered, decapitated. The few survivors broke and ran, fleeing back into the temple's depths. Lawrence stood amid the carnage, chest heaving, scythe dripping ichor. The Zelthari surrounded the artifact, energy blades thrumming. It was over. They had won. The artifact was safe. For now. Lawrence limped to the dais, blood seeping from his wound. The Zelthari parted for him, inclining their heads in respect. He looked down at the artifact, at the power and promise and terrible danger it represented. It couldn't stay here. It couldn't be allowed to fall into Vorkarian claws. One of the Zelthari, an ancient wizened creature, stepped forward. Its voice echoed in Lawrence's mind, weary and sad. The artifact cannot remain, it said. Its power is too great, too corrupting. It must be destroyed lest it bring ruin to us all. Lawrence nodded grimly. He had come to the same conclusion. Can it be done, he asked. Yes, the Zelthari replied, but the process will require a tremendous amount of energy. Energy that, if unleashed, could destabilize the very fabric of this world. Lawrence looked at the artifact, then at the Zelthari. Aliens who had fought beside him, bled beside him, who had trusted him when they had every reason not to. He thought of Earth, of the human Federation, of the billions of lives he had sworn to protect. There was no choice, not really. He had known that from the moment he set foot on this Deathworld. I'll do it, he said, voice rough with pain and resolve. I'll destroy the artifact, whatever it takes. The Zelthari bowed their heads, a gesture of respect and gratitude. You honor us with your courage, Lawrence Mitchell, the Ancient One said. We will help you in this task, in whatever way we can. Lawrence nodded, jaw set. He turned to the artifact, to the instrument of destruction that had haunted this galaxy for eons. One way or another he would see this through, for Earth, for the Federation, for the future, even if it cost him everything. Lawrence and the Zelthari huddled together in the battered temple, the weight of their task heavy on their shoulders. The artifact pulsed with malevolent energy, a constant reminder of the destruction it could unleash. For the artifact must be destroyed, the ancient Zelthari leader said, his telepathic voice tinged with urgency. We must transport it to the geothermal power station deep within the planet's core. There we can overload it with energy, causing it to self-destruct. Lawrence nodded grimly. It won't be easy. The planet's seismic activity has been off the charts since the Vorkarian attack. We'll need precise timing and a hell of a lot of luck. The Zelthari placed a slender hand on Lawrence's shoulder. We will guide you, Lawrence Mitchell. Our telepathic abilities will help navigate the dangers ahead. As they prepared for the perilous journey, a deafening boom shook the temple. Dust rained from the ceiling, ancient stone cracking under the onslaught. Orbital bombardment, Lawrence shouted over the din. The Vorkarians have found us. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. Lawrence's blood ran cold. There in the shimmering blue light stood Laros, the scarred warlord he had left for dead. "Did you think you could escape me, human?" Laros snarled, his voice distorted by cybernetic implants. "I have been reborn, stronger than ever, and I will have my revenge." Lawrence grabbed the artifact, his grip tight. "We need to move now." The tunnels were dark and oppressive, the air thick with the stench of sulfur. Strange bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie green glow. A skittering sound echoed from the depths, growing louder with each passing second. Lawrence raised his plasma scythe, the blade humming to life. A swarm of insectoid horrors burst from the shadows, their carapaces glistening with venomous slime. Lawrence met their charge head-on, the scythe carving through chitin and flesh. The Zelthari fought alongside him, their energy blades flashing in the darkness. Together they pushed forward, leaving a trail of twitching, dismembered bodies in their wake. But the Deathworld had more terrors in store. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, and a massive worm-like creature erupted from the rock. Its maw dripped with corrosive acid, and toxic gas billowed from pores along its segmented body. Lawrence dodged a gout of acid, the sizzling liquid narrowly missing his face. He fired his plasma pistol into the worm's gaping mouth, the bolts exploding down its gullet. The creature thrashed and convulsed, its death throes shaking the tunnel. Lawrence and the Zelthari pressed on, the power station tantalizingly close. But Laros and his elite warriors were hot on their heels, the warlord's cybernetic enhancements, allowing him to track their every move. Plasma fire filled the tunnel, superheated bolts scorching the ancient stone. Lawrence returned fire, his shots finding their mark in Vorkarian flesh. But for every soldier he felled, two more seemed to take their place, an unending tide of scaled bodies and flashing claws. The heat was unbearable now, the pressure crushing. The Zelthari staggered under the psychic strain of shielding the group, their telepathic barriers wavering. At last they reached the power station, a vast chamber thrumming with geothermal energy. In the center, a pulsing core of molten rock and swirling gases. But Laros was there, his plasma scythe crackling with deadly power. The warlord lunged, the blade searing the air. Lawrence met him head-on, the artifact clutched tight. Scythe clashed against scythe, ancient alien metal against advanced human engineering. The chamber shook with the force of their battle, sparks flying as they dueled across the walkways and gantries. The Zelthari fought the Vorkarian soldiers, energy blades humming as they danced a deadly waltz. Lawrence pushed back against Laros, forcing the warlord's scythe aside. With a final desperate effort, he slammed the artifact into the power station's control panel, locking it into place. The artifact began to glow brighter and brighter as the geothermal energy surged into it. The station shook, alarms blaring, warning lights flashing. "No!" Laros roared, his cybernetic eye blazing with fury. "What have you done?" Lawrence grinned, a fierce, defiant smile. "I've ended this, Laros. The artifact will be destroyed, and your empire with it." The warlord howled in rage, lunging forward with his scythe. But Lawrence was ready. He sidestepped the blow and brought his own scythe around in a vicious arc. The blade sheared through Laros's armor, biting deep into flesh and bone. The warlord staggered back, his scythe clattering to the walkway. Lawrence stood over him, plasma scythe raised. "This is for the valiant, for every human you've slaughtered." He brought the blade down, and Laros moved no more. Lawrence nodded, turning to run, but a plasma bolt struck him in the leg, sending him sprawling. A group of Vorkarian soldiers advanced, weapons drawn. The Zelthari leapt to his defense, energy blades flashing. But they were outnumbered and exhausted, their telepathic shields faltering. Lawrence struggled to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his leg. He had to buy them time, had to make sure the artifact was destroyed. He charged the Vorkarian's plasma scythe whirling. He was a whirlwind of steel and fury, cutting down soldiers left and right. But there were too many, and he was only one man. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, scorching his armor, burning his flesh. The artifact pulsed, the energy building to a crescendo. The chamber was shaking itself apart, chunks of rock falling from the ceiling. Lawrence fought on, even as the Vorkarians overwhelmed him. He would die here in this buried chamber on a forgotten Deathworld. But he would die knowing he had saved billions, that he had given humanity a chance. The artifact reached critical mass, the energy tearing through it in a blinding flash. A wave of force exploded outward, vaporizing the Vorkarians where they stood. Lawrence felt the heat wash over him, felt the shockwave lift him off his feet. He closed his eyes, peace settling over him. As the world faded to white around him, he whispered a final prayer, for the valiant, for the Zelthari, for Earth. As the artifact pulsed with an unearthly glow, the power station shook violently, cracks snaking across the walls. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, scalding the air. Lawrence and the Zelthari braced themselves against the tremors, the roar of the overloading artifact nearly deafening. Laros and his Vorkarian warriors pressed their attack, plasma fire sizzling through the chamber. The Zelthari warriors responded with blasts of psychic energy, sending the Vorkarians reeling. Lawrence ducked behind a control panel, his mind racing. The artifact's power was immense, uncontrollable, but maybe, just maybe, it could be directed. "The energy!" he shouted over the din. "We can channel it, use it against the Vorkarian fleet." The Zelthari leader, his luminous eyes wide, nodded in understanding. "The distribution system," he said, his telepathic voice urgent in Lawrence's mind. "If we can modify it, focus the energy upward." "We can wipe out their ships," Lawrence finished, "cripple their invasion." They set to work, Lawrence's fingers flying over the alien controls as the Zelthari warriors held off the Vorkarian onslaught. Sparks flew, consoles exploded, but slowly, surely, the modifications took shape. There was just one problem. "The automation is fried," Lawrence said, his voice grim. "Someone will have to stay behind, manually control the energy flow." The Zelthari exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. "We will stay with you," the leader said. "See this through to the end." Lawrence nodded, a lump in his throat. Together they fought, buying precious seconds as the artifact's power built to a crescendo. Laros, his armor scorched and battered, broke through the Zelthari line. His eyes locked on Lawrence, burning with hatred. "You," he snarled, "you've ruined everything." He drew a pair of crackling energy blades, ancient Zelthari weapons. "Face me, human, let's end this." Lawrence met his gaze unflinching. He activated his own blades, the weapons humming to life. They clashed in a whirlwind of slashes and parries, blades sparking as they met again and again. Lawrence fought with everything he had, every trick and technique the Zelthari had taught him. But Laros was relentless, driven by a rage that bordered on madness. A slash caught Lawrence across the chest, searing through his armor. He staggered, pain lancing through him. Laros loomed over him, blades raised for the killing blow. But Lawrence wasn't done, not yet. With a burst of desperate strength he surged upward, his blade catching Laros under the chin. The warlord's eyes went wide, then glassy. He toppled, his blades clattering to the floor. Lawrence staggered to the controls, every breath an agony. The Zelthari gathered around him, their faces grim with determination. Together they watched the energy levels climb higher and higher. The chamber shook itself apart around them, but they held their ground. Lawrence's hand hovered over the final control. He looked to the Zelthari, these aliens who had become his allies, his friends. They nodded as one. The artifact unleashed its power in a blinding beam of pure energy. It punched through the planet's crust, seared through the atmosphere. In orbit, the Vorkarian ships had a moment to register the approaching doom before the beam engulfed them. One by one, they detonated, blooming into fireballs that lit up the night sky. In the power station, the world turned white. The last thing Lawrence saw was the Zelthari leader, his hand raised in a final salute. Then the chamber collapsed, burying them all in a tomb of rubble and twisted metal. The rubble shifted and groaned, the planet's death throes shaking the very foundations of the ruined power station. Human and Zelthari rescue teams, clad in heavy exosuits to shield them from the radioactive storms, dug frantically through the debris. Their scanners had detected faint life signs, buried deep beneath the twisted metal and shattered stone. "Over here," a human rescuer shouted, his voice crackling over the comms. "I've got a reading." The teams converged on the location, plasma cutters and grav lifters at the ready. They worked with desperate speed, knowing that every second counted. The planet was tearing itself apart, and they had precious little time to evacuate any survivors. Days of backbreaking labor, of sifting through the wreckage, had taken their toll. But they couldn't give up, not when there was still a chance, however slim, of finding someone alive. Our Zelthari rescuer, her luminous eyes narrowed in concentration, directed a grav lifter to remove a massive slab of ferrocrete. As the debris lifted away, they saw them. Lawrence and a handful of Zelthari warriors, their bodies broken and bloody, but still clinging to life. "We've found them," the Zelthari rescuer reported, her telepathic voice tinged with relief and urgency. "But they're in bad shape. We need to get them out of here now." The rescue teams moved in, their exosuits' medical systems already scanning the survivors' vital signs and administering emergency first aid. They loaded Lawrence and the Zelthari onto grav sleds, handling them with infinite care. But even as they prepared to evacuate the survivors, a new danger reared its head. The ground heaved and buckled, massive fissures splitting the earth. Geysers of molten rock and superheated gases erupted from the cracks, turning the air into a searing, toxic miasma. "The planet's core is destabilizing," a human rescuer yelled, her voice barely audible over the roar of the eruptions. "We've got to get out of here fast." The rescue teams raced back to their ships, the grav sleds carrying the survivors bobbing in their wake. They weaved through a hellish gauntlet of lava fountains and collapsing structures, the very ground shifting and warping beneath their feet. They had barely made it to the landing zone when a massive earthquake struck, the shockwave nearly knocking them off their feet. The rescue ships, engines screaming, lifted off just as the landing pad crumbled into a yawning chasm. As the ships clawed for altitude, Lawrence, semi-conscious and strapped into a medical pod, caught a glimpse of the Deathworld through a viewport. The planet was coming apart at the seams, its surface a roiling sea of lava and debris. Continent-sized chunks of the crust were being blasted into space, the atmosphere boiling away into the void. It was a scene of unimaginable destruction, a testament to the terrible power they had unleashed. And as Lawrence watched, a sinking feeling grew in his gut, a realization that their actions had set something far worse than the Vorkarians in motion. In the medical bay, as the rescue ships fled the dying planet, Lawrence overheard snatches of conversation between the human and Zelthari medics. They spoke of an ancient, malevolent entity, the Kelvorti, that had orchestrated the entire war. The Vorkarians, it seemed, had been mere puppets, dancing to the tune of an unseen master. The Kelvorti, they said, had been imprisoned within the artifact, using the conflict to engineer its release. And now, with the artifact destroyed and the Deathworld imploding, the entity was free to turn its wrath upon the galaxy unchecked. Lawrence, his body racked with pain but his mind racing, knew that the fight was far from over. The Human Federation and the Zelthari, once bitter foes, would have to stand together against this new threat, and he, forged in the crucible of the Deathworld, would be at the forefront of that battle. As the rescue ships pierced the veil of the planet's disintegrating atmosphere and plunged into the star-flecked void of space, Lawrence steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The war for the galaxy's survival, he knew, had only just begun. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.